as well, and that leads into a showery day again on Saturday. Perhaps not as many showers across parts of the south, but a chance of seeing longer dry spells. And the far north also turning a little drier, but parts of southeast Scotland, northeast England, again seeing lots of showers through the day. Again, quite mild but quite windy in the south, but it's starting to turn a little colder. These northerly winds picking up across northern Scotland, bringing a chillier feel, and those northerly winds will spread further south as we go through the weekend, so that by Sunday it is much colder everywhere. Goodbye.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton tonight. Boris is bloodied but unbowed by the Partygate witch hunt, and despite the MSM already writing his obituary, one of his oldest allies thinks he's winning in the court of public opinion.
Do you think he'd win a by-election? Oh, yes, yes.
And the former PM has suggested he could refuse to accept the kangaroo court's verdict.
You wouldn't categorise it as a witch hunt or a kangaroo court?
I will wait to see how you proceed with the evidence.
So tonight, a very important question. Should Boris Johnson reject the verdict of the Partygate Privileges Committee? Boris backers David Campbell-Bannerman and Coldwell Ranger go head-to-head with Nina Mishkov on that in what will be a feisty clash shortly. Plus, after leading yesterday's Brexit rebellion against Rishi, Boris has drawn clear battle lines in the fight for the soul of the Tory party. But will their next leader come from this crop of anti-woke Brexiteers?
What I suggest they do is get off Twitter, get to Rwanda, and I'll show them how to stop the boats.
We do not want to see teachers teaching their white pupils about white privilege and inherited racial guilt.
So in our big debate tonight, I'll ask my superstar panel whether the Tories need to plump for a pro-Brexit, anti-woke culture warrior or face Boris setting up his own rival party. With me, Adam Brooks, Sean Bailey and Anna May Mangan. Elsewhere on tonight's show, 3 years on from the disastrous decision to lock down the country, I'll explain why that unforgivable catastrophe means that I and GB News will never stop fighting against the official narrative. Don't miss my special digest next. Also on the way, as the Crown creators spark fury by graphically recreating Princess Diana's car crash, how can Prince Harry continue to bank Netflix's millions while they financially exploit his mother's memory? Diana's former butler and rock, Paul Burrell, speaks out live. And is the Duke of Dope receiving special treatment over his drug revelations? And should he be deported from America? My royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, weigh in. I couldn't believe this. The BBC's Begum PR machine has roared back into life after they tracked down her terrorist best mate, who claims the ISIS bride is a non-believer. So is it time for the Begum Backing Corporation to just stop this twisted rehabilitation campaign? We'll debate that in the media buzz. Plus, after he despicably accused Boris Johnson of faking his near-death COVID experience, why is Alistair Campbell still a commentator of choice for our craven MSM? Well, Calvin McKenzie gives Blair's former spin doctor a much-needed dressing down in Uncancelled. We'll have a first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages the moment they arrive, hot off the press, and the final Greatest Britain and Union Jackass of the week will be coming up too. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Do you remember where you were 3 years ago tonight? I do. I'll never forget it, actually. 3 weeks to flatten the curve, we were told. I had worries back then. I had huge worries about what we were going into. And it's turned out to, I believe, be an unforgivable catastrophe. So I'm going to mark 3 years since that lockdown decision very shortly in a special digest. First, though, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you, and good evening to you. Our top story on GB News tonight. Rishi Sunak and the Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama have vowed to work together to tackle illegal migration. Following talks at Downing Street today, a joint statement said the two Prime Ministers have agreed to deepen the relationship between the two countries, to cooperate on trade, investment and address global threats. It added that Mr Sunak welcomes the Albanian community to British life. And it's after Mr Rama criticised the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, for referring to some people from his country as criminals, comments he branded as disgraceful. While speaking after the talks, he denied many of the migrants in the UK are from Albania.
There's a lot of confusion and there is also a lot of speculation about the data, because it's not simply not true that all these people come from Albania. This is theoretically impossible, arithmetically impossible, and factually not true. They are Albanians that come also from other countries, mainly Greece.
The Northern Ireland Secretary has told Stormont leaders there's no negotiating the Windsor framework and it will become law. Chris Heaton-Harris has been holding talks over the Prime Minister's post-Brexit trade deal at Hillsborough Castle. It's after a key element of the EU-UK agreement, known as the Stormont Break, was overwhelmingly passed in the Commons yesterday. DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson described the Windsor framework as a sticking plaster that won't work, which the Northern Ireland Secretary disputed. World Athletics is banning transgender women from competing in female competitions. if they've gone through male puberty. The World Athletics president says the decision is based on more than 10 years of research and evidence of physical advantages these athletes bring to the female category. Lord Coe has said the council has decided to prioritise fairness before inclusion. Russian athletes will also remain barred from the track and field for the foreseeable future because of the war in Ukraine. Now, Parliament has banned the Chinese-owned social media app TikTok from all government devices. It follows security concerns from the House of Commons and Lords, but won't include personal devices. Scotland has followed suit, with its Deputy First Minister saying the ban will be implemented immediately. It comes as TikTok's chief executive has faced questions at the US Congress over data security and user safety. And lastly, the Bank of England has raised the interest rate for the 11th time in a row from 4% to 4.25%. It's in a bid to slow down the rising cost of living. The central bank's also announced it expects the economy to grow slightly in the second quarter, revising a previous forecast that it would contract. You're up to date. I'm back in an hour. Now back to Dan.
Three years ago, today, the most catastrophic policy in modern history was enacted in the United Kingdom. It would cause tens of thousands of unaccounted deaths and result in economic calamity. But even today, the complicit MSM and political establishment are not prepared to admit its true cost and vow to never do the same thing to us again. The national lockdown should never have happened. I have to say my personal story on this defined my life's purpose and saw me help launch this bold new free speech channel, GBNews, to try and counter the dark forces that had taken hold of British society, including most of the media. Anti-science forces, forces who believed in censorship of all dissenting views as if we were North Korea or Russia. On my very first show on this channel, as the country remained in some form of ludicrous lockdown 15 months on, from 3 weeks to flatten the curve, this was the summer of 2021, to the outrage of the chattering classes and the Ofcom obsessors too, I set out why following China's inhumane policy had been an unforgivable mishap, and then, in the months that followed, proceeded to turn over airtime to those good folk who found themselves banned by the rest of the media. Lockdowns are a crude measure. Mark my words, in the years to come, we will discover they have caused far more deaths and devastation than the government has ever admitted.
I would say to my kids, don't immunise your children because of that age group, as long as they're healthy.
People wanted to discredit us, and sadly, many scientists, many colleagues, many friends were happy to sign up to that.
It is extraordinary that the narrative of the world's largest authoritarian regime took hold and became the prominent narrative throughout the whole of 2020.
The Iraq War was popular.
Yes,
believe it or not, at the time.
Yeah, it was.
And now it's a dirty word. I think that same transformation in public consciousness needs to come to the lockdown, and so that public health, if it ever suggests it again, the public at large will say, "Are you sure?" and push back hard.
It was all there, as you saw, the Great Barrington Declaration's need for herd immunity, the Chinese lab leak theory, the complete lunacy in vaccinating the young and the healthy, not to mention the untold damage COVID jabs has caused. All those good folk, and many more, who have proven to be categorically right, and me, were branded dangerous conspiracy theorists and granny killers. Even today, that trend continues when I use this show to question, for example, the deranged march to net zero, gender extremism, or the anti-democratic forces now controlling Westminster. So, yes, lockdown changed me forever. I no longer trust the official narrative. no longer believe the civil servants and the blob have our best interests at heart. And sadly, I know much of the media works in lockstep with the establishment. That's why I've been so frustrated with the Privileges Committee witch hunt against Boris Johnson, someone who, by the way, tried and failed to defeat those lockdown forces. Now, of course, Boris must take a lot of the blame for giving in to the nefarious and scientific public health establishment. But how on earth is the full force of Westminster now focusing on bringing him down over Partygate while ignoring the scale of the catastrophe caused by lockdowns? The official COVID inquiry is a joke. It's a joke, and years away from even achieving a thing. I actually doubt it ever will, given the terms of the inquiry are so fixed in the favour of lockdown zealots who still peddle this insane idea that if we'd locked down 2 weeks earlier, then none of this would have happened. That's why I had to launch a lockdown inquiry here on this very show, to try and hold the bad actors like Matt Hancock to account. Your policies, Mr. Hancock, caused situations like that, caused grieving folk to miss the final moments of their relatives' lives, caused fathers to miss the birth of their children. Do you accept at all that there was overreach on your part and that form of human suffering was not worth it?
There's a reason that these policies were in place. And the reason is that the scale of the impact in terms of the deaths from letting COVID run without restraint would have been worse. And that is, there's no way, you can't get away from the fact that that's true.
Rubbish, he's a liar. And actually, there's a lot of people trying to rewrite history this week, from Piers Morgan to Susan Mickey, but they must not be allowed to. Lockdown was unforgivable. We will feel its dark impact for many years. And that's why we must continue to fight against the official narrative here on GB News, no matter the conspiracist labels they throw at us. Because guess what? 3 years on, those so-called conspiracies have virtually all come true. To respond now, my superstar panel, the businessman and activist Adam Brooks, the former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author Anna May Mangan. So, Adam Brooks, lockdown changed you as well, didn't it? You went from being a relatively happy-go-lucky bloke enjoying your life to a strident political commentator.
Yeah, and getting labelled by government departments as an anti-lockdown campaigner and God knows what else.
A danger. You were considered a danger.
Yeah, I was monitored.
The official narrative.
I was monitored and everything. Look, at the end of the day, when my mum was really ill, sort of mid to late March, so I was sort of on ball for 3 weeks or so, especially when they're saying 3 weeks to flatten the curve.
Of course.
Under no circumstances did I ever think or ever dream that it was going to go on so long and be so damaging. You know, and it was sort of late April that I was speaking to people like Professor Sikora and other people that had advised governments in health and different matters, and realised that I had to stand up and use my platform to fight back. You know, and credit to a lot of the people that put their head above the parapet. There was a lot of us, and we were called every name under the sun, as you said.
And lost work.
Yeah.
A lot of our friends through this movement were cancelled. They lost tens of thousands of pounds. They lost their livelihood. They put it all on the line.
But I mean,
they believe
it's
so
now
deeply.
It's a fact that lockdowns cost lives. You can't disagree. No one, even if you're pro-lockdowns, you cannot deny that.
Well, I mean, it's even more than that, though.
Yeah.
They cost more lives than they ever saved.
Yes.
And I believe they cost many, many more lives than COVID as well, especially when you actually break down the age of the folk.
The thing that annoys me, Dan, I think now the data proves that infections were falling into before every lockdown that was called from this government.
Of course, and that's why it should always have been voluntary, Sean Bailey, because I'm a bit like Adam. I was prepared to say, OK, fine, 3 weeks, very reluctantly. But even in March 2020, when I wasn't on this network, I was on Talk Radio at the time, I was going on air and I was saying, this is the UK. We are Great Britain. We're never going to do what they're doing right now in China. They're never going to force us to stay home. This needs to potentially be a voluntary effort. But something changed, Sean. And obviously, at the time, you were very close to the Tory party leadership. What changed? What happened to the sort of intrinsic freedoms and civil liberties that we thought we had in the UK? Why was the Conservative Party so prepared to give them away?
I'll say two or three things. I was a person who wasn't against the first lockdown. We had a pandemic. No one in our lifetime had been through it and needed to deal with it. And the government were very afraid of causing death and being held to that measure. So the first lockdown, yes. I think if you look at lockdowns, the second one, how long they were, and most importantly, how untargeted they were, that's where the problem arose. If we had locked down the real vulnerable and then supported the vulnerable, the whole COVID outcome would have looked very different.
If we
if we didn't have the second lockdown, for instance, because what's really, I think, where this inquiry is falling down, if we can't have a truthful conversation with ourselves because we're saving the blushes of someone else, we're just punishing our children in the future. Because one of the real outcomes from lockdown was the mental health effect. Another one would be the effect on our children's education and what that means for their futures. So because of the very serious effects of lockdown, and of course, the financial effect, we should be having a realistic conversation, regardless of who's embarrassed.
And guess what? Poverty causes deaths too. And this idea that somehow our cities and our businesses have bounced back, rubbish. They haven't bounced back at all. Look, Anna May Mangan, like many folk on the left, you were a bit of a lockdown hysteric. 3 years on, do you admit that you were wrong?
I'm a political swinger. I'm not on the left. Yeah, it depends.
Go you!
But listening to you, I'm absolutely shocked.
Why?
Because you're missing the point.
No, I'm not.
So spectacularly. It was about the virus and the damage the virus was doing, but it was about the NHS. The NHS was buckling. It was falling into a hole. I know it was. And what happens? I mean, we were queuing for toilet rolls. We were queuing for toilet rolls. How would you feel about queuing for treatment or your turn on a ventilator?
Well,
I mean, people were dropping
Anna May,
flies.
have you looked at the state of the NHS now? Do you know why that's in such a bad state? Because we were told to delay going to look at non-COVID treatments then. It went from being the National Health Service to the National COVID Service. And guess what? Folk are now dying of cancer in their thousands
Just
because
keep going
of
and going.
lockdown.
Don't listen to anything else. What I'm telling you is that the government didn't handle everything perfectly. Of course they didn't. They bumbled their way through it. Matt Hancock's a disgrace. The care home situation was a disgrace. But the fact is that there still aren't enough doctors. There certainly weren't then. And when you consider that the doctors were getting the virus and were dying and seriously ill with it, what was going to happen to the population? You're all talking about yourselves. And I have to say, I'm very sorry for the people who lost relatives and friends and loved ones. But that was the virus. That wasn't the government. Can
I offer a little challenge? Firstly, I wasn't talking about myself. I was talking about the children in the country. The second thing as well, the experience we had in London was very, very empty Nightingale hospitals. They were empty.
Why is that?
And the other thing I'd say as well, the idea that we need to protect the NHS. I always grew up with the idea that the NHS was going to protect us.
Yeah.
So I found that a little bit challenging.
So
and
the
let's be clear,
government weren't ready for a pandemic.
No.
They
was ready, but they ripped up the pandemic plan. They ripped
up
the plan because...
Who's going to work
why would you look at China? Why would you look at China? We had a public health policy. It was ludicrous. And I'm really shocked, Anna May, that you can't look 3 years on and actually just hold your hands up and say it was a mistake. The NHS was never close to being overwhelmed.
That's
more
ludicrous.
people have died
there
from
aren't enough
lockdown
doctors
than
and
ever did
nurses
from
now.
COVID.
And the government are still picking a fight with them after all they did during
but hold on a second. Hold on. The fact that there's not enough doctors and nurses we can agree on, but that had nothing to do with the pandemic. No. That was a situation that happened beforehand, and the pandemic made that problem worse.
So the government weren't ready. I didn't say the government handled it
this is the other thing.
perfectly.
I've got to say this and I'll stop, yeah? It's not the government, it's the NHS who weren't ready. We give them £140 billion. They should be doing something with that money.
The data shows that infections were falling before every lockdown. Every subsequent wave that we've had has gone up and down very quickly. The same would have happened if we hadn't locked down in March 2020.
And by the way, if you read the Daily Telegraph's lockdown files, which expose Matt Hancock's WhatsApp messages and all of the conversations that were going on, do you know why we stayed in lockdown, Anime? It was nothing to do with the NHS. It was nothing to do with public health. It was to do with the media coverage and the fact that the public had been so terrified. And this scumbag then said before Christmas 2020, oh, we're going to terrify the pants off them now by unleashing the next variant. It was all a scare campaign.
No, it was
a disgrace.
The fact is that we don't have enough doctors and nurses now when there's no pandemic. So imagine what it was like 3 years ago. Nothing's improved.
To end this, Dan, the fact is...
Have a bit of pity for the staff.
Sweden has the lowest excess mortality over the last 3 years in the EU and the Nordics.
Yeah, but this is all with hindsight.
They didn't lock down.
No, it wasn't with hindsight.
Mystic Meg is dead.
So now, please acknowledge that we were wrong to lock down.
All of these people saying now, oh, the science has changed. Bullshit. The science hasn't changed.
It was a
The science was ignored. The science was ignored. The science that didn't
So why didn't Sweden collapse?
Ignored.
If it was a deadly virus that we all had to lock down for,
so you don't think there was a virus? You actually deny the fact
there was a virus.
When have I said that?
So what was it? Just like the flu or a sniffle?
You tell me, Anna, why Sweden didn't collapse? Anna May, sorry, why didn't Sweden collapse? They didn't lock down.
Well, do you know what? I actually don't care about Sweden.
Well, you don't want facts.
Because I don't know. I haven't got the figures in front of me. But I know that lockdown definitely saved a lot of lives.
It's cost a load of lives. Sweden has the lowest excess mortality nearly in the world. They did not lock down. We did not need to lock down.
It's really sad that we weren't ready, that the NHS isn't ready. It's still under-resourced. It was under-resourced then, and they're still not learning the lesson.
One last thing about the NHS. They ran a programme beforehand. They're given £10 million to figure out how to respond to a pandemic. We never saw any evidence of that when we actually had the pandemic.
But also, we ripped the plans up. We ripped the plans up because the politicians got terrified because of the media hysteria, and they decided to follow China. And you know what? Never follow China, because look at where China's
never follow
now.
Piers Morgan.
Sean Bailey, Adam Brooks, Anna May Mang, and my superstar panel, and they're with me all night. But coming up, has Prince Harry benefited from special treatment on his visa application? And as a result, should he be facing deportation for his drug use? My royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, weigh in soon. But up next in the clash, as Jacob Rees-Mogg suggests he would easily win a by-election, should Boris Johnson reject the verdict of the Partygate kangaroo court? Former transport advisor to Johnson, Colville Ranger, ex-Conservative MMP, a staunch Boris ally, David Campbell-Bannerman, and the broadcaster and journalist Nina Mishkov. She's not. Do battle straight off the break. My email on this, Dan at gbnews.uk. Vote in our poll at GBNews. We're back soon.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Click that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Lady Colin Campbell is on the way, but it's time now for The Clash. And despite the bloodthirsty MSM prematurely penning his obituary, I think Boris Johnson will feel emboldened by his performance in front of the Partygate Kangaroo Court yesterday. And former leader of the House, former Business Secretary, my GB News colleague, Jacob Rees-Mogg, believes he'll have no concerns if the witch hunt is successful in sparking a by-election. Watch.
I think Boris has won in the court of public opinion, and that's ultimately for politicians what matters.
Do you think he'd win a by-election?
Oh, yes, but I doubt a by-election will be necessary.
Boris has himself cast doubt on whether he would even accept the Kangaroo Court's verdict. Here he is during yesterday's hearing.
So you wouldn't categorise it as a witch hunt or a kangaroo court?
I will wait to see how you proceed with the evidence that you have. I will study your conclusions from the evidence. I deprecate the terms that you have used. Either way, I believe that if you study this evidence impartially, you will come to the conclusion that I've given.
So what do you think? Should Boris Johnson reject the verdict of the Partygate Privileges Committee? Let me know by emailing me, dan@gbnews.uk, tweet me at GBNews, a poll running there too. And doing battle on this now, former transport advisor to Boris Johnson, Colville Ranger, ex-Conservative MEP and a staunch Boris ally, David Campbell Bannerman, and the broadcaster and journalist Nina Mishkov. So, David Campbell Bannerman, surely Boris shouldn't accept the verdict of the Privileges Committee. I've said for months I think the verdict was decided before they took a scrap of evidence, and they've changed the goalposts, they've changed the rules. So why should he give this kangaroo court legitimacy?
Well, Dan, it's great to be back. Just to say, you're right. I mean, there were 3 tweets that Harriet Harman made, and she shouldn't really have chaired the thing. So I think you're right on that. Well, it's a complex process. If the Privileges Committee do rule against him, there should be a vote in Parliament, and hopefully MPs will then overturn it, or certainly Tory MPs will. I think the consequences of bringing down Boris to them would be personally very damaging and possibly terminal. So you've got that stage. And then, of course, someone has to get a petition together. Maybe Sue Gray's son, allegedly, the campaign manager in Uxbridge, would get it together and you'd have a by-election. And Boris may not stand, of course. He might maybe go to another seat. That's a possibility, and maybe a safer seat, inverted commas. So there's lots of angles on this, but hopefully the Privilege Committee will do their job. They are representing the whole of Parliament, and I think it's very important they get this right, because if you start saying these vague terms about recklessly misleading or whatever, then every minister in future or official advice.
It's a joke. Will it's not a joke. be able and it's chilling for democracy. But Colville Ranger, I believe the verdict is fixed. I believe it's set. We know what it's going to be. I mean, Nadine Dorries, you know, one of Boris's great allies, you know, former Culture Secretary, has come out tonight and said he will be found guilty.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Dan, from what people saw yesterday, it didn't feel like on that committee there was an even-handedness in dealing with the former Prime Minister. Yeah, and you're smiling, I'm smiling. People watched it and could see that, is this really a fair examination of this man? He's giving his evidence, and all it felt like was an attack. It didn't feel like looking for a fair, balanced view of the facts. And there isn't, as you've said, a shred of evidence as yet. Now, let's see, as Boris has said, let's see what evidence they get. Let's see what they put in front of themselves around whether it was knowing and whether it was reckless. Boris Johnson himself was absolutely crystal clear. He had his time to put it on the record that he did not knowingly and he did not recklessly. And I think this is the facts.
Exactly.
These are the facts. There's lots of colour thrown on this by other
Exactly,
people.
they
About,
are the facts. But the problem is the goalposts have been moved so many times to make this a joke, in my opinion. So, Nina Mishkov, why on earth should Boris have to accept this verdict? He's made it very clear he doesn't agree with the way that the Privileges Committee has done their business. He shouldn't accept it, should he? He doesn't have to legitimise this joke of a process.
Because it's democracy in action.
How?
It's because it's a committee that was set up for Parliament, by Parliament. Nobody voted against it. Nobody voted against Harriet Harman as chair. Nobody did anything. And watching it yesterday, I thought it was entirely even-handed. It was totally transparent. A kangaroo court is held behind closed doors. This was for everybody to see, to watch Boris blustering, getting testy, getting cross. And the thing is, you know, if you are telling the truth, you don't need a hotshot lawyer at hundreds of thousands of pounds to tell you what to say.
I'm sorry, Nina. You do when you have the entire Westminster establishment to destroy you.
You will get testy. You will represent yourself, and you will do everything to make sure your reputation.
Well, of course, but you don't need to be rehearsed. You don't need to. Of course, he's being attacked. You don't need to be rehearsed. You know what the truth is. The trouble with Boris is that he's always been a liar. He's been caught out at lying in all aspects of his life. He was dumped from his first job for lying. I think it was at the Times or the Sunday Times. He's lied to his wives, his women.
People are using this committee as de facto for many other complaints about Boris. They're using this, not about the issue at hand, about the point of whether Parliament has been misled, but to bring all these other issues that they may have against him personally, decisions he's made previously. He's been an amazing, once-in-a-generation politician.
But Nina, you just did. Look, Nina, in fairness, that's exactly what you just did. We're talking about a very specific point over whether he misled Parliament knowingly or recklessly. And you talk about his marriages. So, Nina, let me put it to you. Let's just be honest, Nina. Just be honest. You just hate the guy.
I don't hate the guy.
You're bitter about the guy because he delivered
He's
Brexit,
an amazing
and you're a
man.
Massive Ramoni. You hate the bloke.
I don't hate him. Culver is quite right. He's a once-in-a-generation person. He is an extraordinary man. He's incredibly charismatic. He's got a brain the size of the planet. He's got a vocabulary, real classical education, and very, very, very funny. But what he lacks in terms of a leader or somebody who should be in charge of what happens to people's lives is that he has no integrity. Where are his morals?
Where are his push the referendum?
Yes, because
won the leadership.
Yes, of course.
Colville, Nina, let David come in. Let David come in here.
The idea that this was fair yesterday, I mean, comparing number 10 to a speedometer, where you've got a very handy guide to what's going on, when you've got hundreds of officials, thousands of officials all working on things, is a complete joke. And there's Bernard Jenkins going on about it should have been obvious. I mean, well, it's like, is it obvious to prime ministers what's happening in every NHS hospital around the country?
No,
I mean,
but he's not living in an NHS hospital. He is living in number 10. And although it may be a large place, if there is a party that goes on till 4 a.m., people are throwing up in the cabinet room, his son's swing broken, suitcases of wine, and he should know. He must have known. He knew very well, but that was...
Nina, can I just recommend something? Go and read the 52 pages of evidence that Boris submitted to the committee, because I think you didn't get a fair and accurate portrayal yesterday.
And
because the committee members had an agenda. But if you go away, Nina, and read that 52 pages of evidence like I did earlier this week, I promise you will come away absolutely, resolutely clear that he didn't knowingly or recklessly mislead Parliament. That's all that matters. It actually doesn't matter what happened at the parties. This is about, did he knowingly and recklessly mislead Parliament?
It does matter, because did he knowingly mislead Parliament? Now, the point what I was making about him being a liar was that I've read from people who know him well, ex-girlfriends, who say that the trouble with Boris is that he's had to lie to get out of it. And by the time, within 24 hours, he's convinced himself that the lie is true.
OK, final word to Colville.
If we're talking about ex-girlfriends as character references for anyone, you know, this doesn't make sense. This is not a serious conversation.
No, Nina, they might.
It is a serious conversation.
Might have a reason to have a particular
Jacob Rees-Mogg is completely wrong. The country is against him. Over 2/3 of the country think he's lied.
David, final word to you. Final word,
David. He will not be. If he stood,
Nina,
he would not be voted back in.
Final word to David, Nina.
The left fear Boris because he delivered Brexit and he can still win. And I believe he will come back in whatever guise, you know, he will come back. And, you know, this is a bit farcical, this whole analysis, this whole procedure. And it's very unfair. And, you know, for instance, he never got any cake. It was his advisors that ate the cake. They didn't even
We're not talking about cake. We're not talking about
I'm going to leave it there. Thank you all so much. That was former Transport Advisor to Boris Johnson, Colville Ranger, ex-Conservative MEP, a staunch Boris ally, always David Campbell Bannerman, and the broadcaster and journalist Nina Mishkov. But who do you agree with? Should Boris Johnson reject the verdict of the Partygate Privileges Committee? Mark on Twitter says it's not an honest verdict if they had already decided prior to joining the committee that Boris was guilty. It's just a kangaroo court verging on a lynching. From Paul, Boris is guilty and they should suspend him from Parliament for 10 days. He'd then have to survive a by-election, which he won't win. Adios, Boris. And from John, Blair lied to the House on weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, which led to 500,000 deaths. Johnson eats cake. Well, actually, as David pointed out, he didn't even eat the cake and gets stitched up. And your verdict is now in. Wow, 56% of you say Boris should reject the verdict of the Partygate Kangaroo Court. 44% of you say he needs to accept it. Coming up, as Tory councillor Angela Kilmartin is suspended for saying she doesn't want pride or heterosexual sex flags in high streets. This is yet another example of the left cracking down on free speech to force through their gender ideology. Angela herself joins me in the studio very soon. But next is the Duke of Doak receiving special treatment over his drug revelations, and should he be deported from America? My royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, weigh in right after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m. Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island's story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time for our Royal Masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier. Now, Prince Harry under intense scrutiny tonight over his excessive drug taking, a habit the Duke of Dope openly bragged about on several occasions this year, including in this boast in his autobiography, Spare.
Of course, I had been doing cocaine around this time. At someone's country house during a shooting weekend. I'd been offered a line and I'd done a few more since.
So speculation now rife in the US that Harry could have either lied on his visa application or received special treatment from US officials to enter the country. Now, a Washington, D.C.-based conservative think tank called the Heritage Foundation is currently locked in a battle with officials who are at this point refusing to publish the details of the Duke's visa application. So this is what Niall Gardner from the Heritage Foundation told us about it.
This is an issue of accountability and transparency, and there should not be, under any circumstances, preferential treatment given to a public figure like Prince Harry.
So, Lady C, big question marks over this. Do you think Harry potentially lied to enter the US, or has he been given special treatment by his mates in the White House?
Oh, Darren,
You've got a cold. You've got a cold, Lady C.
More than a cold. Oh, maybe Aurora can go and get me a Coke. You know, something to drink.
Yes, a cola. A cola. Yeah, I hear you.
I would be very surprised if he did not falsify in some way his visa application form, because it really does ask it's quite in-depth questions about your drug taking. And it does actually, though, say, have you had convictions, which, of course, he's not had, or have you been charged with an offence, which he hasn't been charged with. But if I remember correctly from my own visa applications over the years, that they do actually ask if you have ever taken illegal drugs. And, of course, he has taken them constantly over the decade.
And he's proud of it, Phil. He's boasting about it, Phil. So surely this is his own fault. He doesn't seem to have any respect for the laws of his new country, Phil.
No, he's been hoisted by his own petard, hasn't he, Dan? I mean, if he hadn't have been so open about it in the book,
The same as confessing to killing 25 Taliban and going on about that. He's now been, exposed for the drug taking, and it's all his own fault. He probably thought it was therapeutic to talk about it, but it set a bad example to young people, and now it's all coming home to roost. And a couple of hours ago, I might have said to you that I thought he might, nothing would happen to him, bearing in mind we've got a Democrat in the White House, and the Democrats are running the show in California, when we all know which side Harry and Meghan are on. But now that this group, the Heritage Foundation, are sort of getting stuck into this, and the Department of Homeland Security are being a bit coy about the answers, I'm starting to think he's got something to worry about.
Well, Lady C, he does, doesn't he? Because at the end of the day, the immigration, the Homeland Security departments in the US are very strict on this type of thing unless you are a US citizen. If you are a non-US citizen, look at Nigella Lawson. She was banned from entering the country, actually taken off a plane as a result of a newspaper story. She hadn't even admitted to drug taking.
Well, absolutely. But, the fact of the matter is, it doesn't really matter which political party's in power. The reality is that Harry's a member of the royal family, and both the Democrats and the Republicans are not going to want to antagonize the crowd. I mean, let's face facts. I would be very surprised if anything happens. But I think what should happen is when Harry leaves the country, he should be denied re-entry. That's what should happen. Will it happen? I wouldn't bet good money.
Well, that is interesting, Phil, because some folk, for that reason that Lady C bring up, think if this might be another reason why Harry decides not to come to the coronation.
Yeah, it's like a reverse thing, isn't it? Prince Andrew doesn't want to go to America in case he's arrested, and Harry doesn't want to come over here. Now we want him to come to the coronation, so he can't get back. I mean, we keep changing our minds. I think his biggest problem is if he's still taking drugs. If he goes to a party or some other social scene, and you get the impression he might well be still taking them, that's when he could get into trouble. If someone sets him up and takes a photo of him doing something silly, I think it could be a big problem for him. But I don't think he's going to be arrested. I don't think anything's going to happen to him. But I think there is danger in the future if he keeps taking drugs.
Well, Lady C, the other day he was boasting about drugs again in that public therapy session. He seems to be proud of them. He doesn't seem to actually have any understanding that drugs cause misery for the people who he claims to care about. The impoverished people around the world, the young kids who are dragged into crime through county line gangs. It's this middle-class snobbery, isn't it, of the posh drug users, Lady C?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, but Harry is a gross elitist of the highest order. He doesn't really care about the people. He cares about milking his supposed love for the people so that he and Meghan can make a lot of money. I think, though, that if you stop to think about what's going on, Harry is actually, in my opinion, and I've written books on the subject of personality disorders and addiction, Harry, in my opinion, is a drug addict. And he's a drug addict who is using drugs as a medicine. He's
well, of course,
himself.
Of course, he has admitted to drug use in Spare. He has claimed that he is not addicted, but at the end of the day, if he's taken them over a very long period of time, who knows? Fascinating discussion. Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, my royal masterminds, we will speak next week. But coming up, as Boris Johnson sets the agenda in the fight for the future of the Conservatives, I'll ask my superstar panel whether the Tories need to plump for a pro-Brexit, anti-woke culture warrior or face the prospect of Boris setting up his own rival party. That's up soon, but next, as Tory councillor Angela Kilmartin is suspended for saying she doesn't want pride or heterosexual sex flags in high streets, is this yet another example of the left's crackdown on free speech to force through their gender ideology? Angela herself joins me in the studio very soon.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. The fate of Angela Kilmartin, a councillor from Braintree in Essex, exploded onto national newspapers this week after she was hung out to dry for simply expressing her opinion on public decency. Approached in an online community group by a man offering pride flags for local businesses on display, she replied, "I don't want pride sex flags along my high street. I don't even want heterosexual flags along my high street. Sex is for the bedroom and private life and not for displaying preferences in public." Now, believe it or not, Angela was suspended by Wootton Town Council, who say they celebrate diversity and expect our councillors and staff to do the same. And they're now investigating her, despite supporters reaching out to her to agree they are sick of this insistence on flaunting sexuality in ordinary public life. And Angela joins me now. So, Angela, what a shocking story. You know, whether people disagree with your view or not, surely, as a well-respected councillor who has had a very long life, I know you don't look like you have, but you've had a very long life, you should surely be able to express your rights about whether you want pride flags or heterosexual flags or whatever in your high street.
Well, I should be, and I did take the precaution, totally, of signing under my own private account.
So this was
I did not sign as a candidate. It's a personal view.
You were not expressing the Conservative Party view.
No, absolutely not. You can't do that. You have to be extremely careful what you sign off on. And I wrote it under my personal account because honestly, it got under my skin. How can someone go round and see every shop owner and say, "Please take a pride flag"? Now, I've called it a pride sex flag because I understand that the pride movement, and they won't have this, they've been on at me, I understand that the pride movement is about different sexualities. No problem. They've made themselves different. I haven't made them different. We all love the people who live in Whittam and roundabout. But I've had hundreds of thousands of supporters. You can see the newspapers, the comments. One person can write a comment, there's nearly 5,000 ticks on it.
Well, exactly. So what was the Conservative Party doing, suspending you for expressing a view that actually, amongst Conservative Party members, is pretty popular?
Well, I think it's a generic thing. If somebody complains about you to the district council or the town council, they put in train a series of laws, rules, whatever, and they follow those through, presumably to the letter. The monitoring officer is also in control, but no one's written to me. I don't know if I'm charged with anything. Obviously don't know what those charges are. In 21 days, they have to make some kind of reply, and I'm just sitting here waiting. Now, I must tell you that Boris Johnson is suspended for 10 days only.
Well, he might be.
I am suspended. No, I think he is already, isn't he?
Well, no, that's what they're currently looking at. That's what they're currently looking at.
Definitely suspended for 21 days.
Which exactly, if you were Boris, you'd be out on your ear for good as a result of that. But look, do you feel that this actually represents, though, a more chilling attack on free speech in society? Because I am very concerned about this now. If public elected politicians cannot express viewpoints that their constituents actually agree with without fearing for their job, this country is going in the wrong direction.
Well, but they've already got these rules and laws laid down, and nobody gets to look at them until you get a situation. This is the only situation I have ever been suspended on. And the only word I know about suspenders is what women wear.
Yes, and by the way, you're not saying that you have a problem with diversity, you're just saying you don't want these pride flags up on the street.
And they were never... They were never even...
flags.
Yes, nothing. I don't want any flags up my high street. Even our town hall has a Union Jack flag, a Armed Forces Day flag, and Royal British Legion for Remembrance Time. Those are the only 3 flags that fly up there, and that's correct. And every town council will go along with that, and every citizen will agree with that.
Well, look, Angela Kilmartin, I think you're absolutely brilliant. And actually, you've got quite a following after this week.
Oh, my God.
Boris should look out.
No, I'll join Boris. We can go hang together.
In the suspended corner, Angela Kilmartin. We will keep across the story. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Now, coming up, should Netflix's ghastly Diana crash scene recreation in The Crown be the last straw for Prince Harry's sordid Hollywood media deals? Her former butler and close friend Paul Burrell joins me soon. But next, as the Boris versus Rishi psychodrama continues with their party lurching to the centre, do the Tories need to plump for an anti-woke culture warrior or face Boris setting up his own rival party? My superstar panel debate that, and I'll deliver the first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages. That's straight after this short break.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, where have all the true blue Conservatives gone? Amid Boris's Partygate scandal and Rishi's hated Brexit deal, just how do the Tories pull themselves out of the politically centre swamp that's left them wet and rudderless? A huge lashing of red meat policies is tipped to appease the disgruntled majority, but are the explosive whispers that Boris could quit and start his own Farage-like movement the solution? My superstar panel debate that next, and tonight I'm joined by Adam Brooks, Sean Bailey and Anna May Mangan. As Alistair Campbell morphs from ranting socialist to swivel-eyed conspiracy theorist after claiming Boris lied about his near-death COVID experience, just why does the lamestream media hold Tony Blair's shamed former spin doctor in such high regard? Fleet Street legend Calvin McKenzie uncancelled on that during the hour. And has The Crown, the Netflix show, gone beyond artistic license by reconstructing Princess Diana's grisly Paris car crash? And how on earth can pious Prince Harry keep working for this Hollywood company when they keep cashing in on the memory of his late mother? Di's confidant and rock former butler Paul Burrell joins me live for an emotional interview that you won't want to miss. Plus, the BBC's Shamima Begum Lovin continues after they tracked down her terrorist best mate so she could play down her role with the death cult ISIS. Should the Beeb just stop its obsessive rehabilitation of the ISIS bride who betrayed her country? And woke Sky TV bosses blow full time on this Saturday morning favourite. John. But were they wrong to give Soccer AM the boot after 30 years, or has society moved on from that kind of laddish behaviour? We'll get stuck into both of those stories in our Media Buzz imminently. Also, new Union Jackass, Greatest Britain, so stay up with us. And the first front pages, they are just about to land. I'm going to show you them immediately after Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening. The top story on GB News tonight, Rishi Sunak and the Albanian Prime Minister Edi Rama have vowed to work together to tackle illegal migration. Following talks in Downing Street today, a joint statement says the two Prime Ministers have agreed to deepen their relationship and to cooperate on trade, investment and global threats. It added that Mr Sunak welcomes the Albanian community to British life. That's after Mr Rama criticised the Home Secretary for referring to some people from his country as criminals, comments he branded as disgraceful. Speaking after the talks, he denied many of the migrants in the UK are from Albania.
There's a lot of confusion, and there is also a lot of speculation about the data, because it's simply not true that all these people come from Albania. This is theoretically impossible, arithmetically impossible, and factually not true. They are Albanians that come also from other countries, mainly Greece.
Also today, the Northern Ireland Secretary has told Stormont leaders there's no negotiating the Windsor framework and it will become law. Chris Heaton-Harris has been holding talks over the Prime Minister's post-Brexit trade deal at Hillsborough Castle. It's after a key element of the EU-UK agreement, known as the Stormont Break, was overwhelmingly passed in the Commons yesterday. DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson described the Windsor framework as a sticking plaster that wouldn't work, which the Northern Ireland Secretary disputed. Now, World Athletics is banning transgender women from competing in female competitions if they've gone through male puberty. The World Athletics president says the decision is based on more than 10 years of research and evidence of physical advantages these athletes bring to the female category. Lord Coe has said the council has decided to prioritise fairness before inclusion. Russian athletes will also remain barred from track and field for the foreseeable future because of the war in Ukraine. Parliament has banned the Chinese-owned social media app TikTok from all government devices. It follows security concerns from the House of Commons and Lords, but won't include personal devices. Scotland has followed suit, with its Deputy First Minister saying the ban will be implemented immediately. It comes as TikTok's chief executive has faced questions at the US Congress over data security and user safety. And lastly, the Bank of England raised the interest rate for the 11th time in a row today from 4% to 4.25%. That's in a bid to slow down the rising cost of living. The central bank's also announced it expects the economy to grow slightly in the second quarter, revising a previous forecast it would contract. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+, Radio+, the TuneIn app. You're with GB News. Back now to Dan Wootton tonight.
Tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. First front pages are in. Let's go to Metro first. And the headline is Harvest of Horror. Nigerian politician and his wife who face jail in the UK for plans to harvest a young man's kidney to save their sick daughter. Meanwhile, scheming Sturgeon bows out as First Minister. I'm going to have a lot to say about this on her last day on Monday. The Eye leads on news that there will be no tax cuts this year as the government grapples with rising inflation. It comes as the Bank of England raised interest rates to 4.25% in another blow for Brits. And The Guardian carries an exclusive revealing that taxpayers have forked out almost £500 million buying the beds in the country's worst care homes over the past 4 years, but councils are left with awkward questions to answer. My superstar panel, back with me now. The businessman and activist Adam Brooks, the former Conservative London mayoral candidate Sean Bailey, and the author Anna May Mangan. Now, amidst the chaos of Partygate and Rishi Sunak's hated Brexit deal, is a Conservative party that's lost its identity by lurching to the centre of politics a real issue? Well, here's a flavour of what could have been for the Tories had they not succumbed to an undemocratic globalist coup.
We do not want to see teachers teaching their white pupils about white privilege and inherited racial guilt.
What I suggest they do is get off Twitter, get to Rwanda, and I'll show them how to stop the boats.
Some of the nonsense that we've been getting, we had a training programme called Check Yo Privilege. Now, what on earth is that? It's a job creation scheme created by the woke for the woke.
40-year-old men masquerading as teenagers. I mean, that's absolutely immoral.
I don't think that biological males should be competing in female sporting events.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
Ms. Truss. Enough already. Now, Sunday Telegraph editor Alistair Heath says voters are now desperate for a new hero to empower the disgruntled majority, urging the next leader to be, quote, more of a Johnsonite than Boris ever was. He wrote in the Daily Telegraph today, the Tories must not be just Eurosceptic, but also sceptical of net zero, anti-European Convention on Human Rights, anti-woke and pro-economic growth for all. But with the Conservatives currently being run by a bunch of centre-left wets, Johnson's former newspaper went further in a bombshell leader column today. This is what the Daily Telegraph had to say. It is not difficult to imagine if Boris is indeed removed from Parliament, him returning in another guise, maybe even as the leader of a new party, dedicated to channeling the fury and disappointment that many millions feel towards a failed establishment. So, let me come to the top Tory on the panel, Sean Bailey. Is your party facing an identity crisis, Sean? Because over the last summer, during the leadership contest, you roundly rejected Rishi Sunak and all of the wets in the party and backed an anti-woke, low-tax vision propagated by Liz Truss and her allies. But that's not how the country is being run.
Look, we definitely face an identity crisis. There's no doubt about that. And if you see what members are calling for, what the country's calling for and what's being delivered, there isn't much difference between us and the Labour Party. Almost every single major step the government has done, Keir Starmer has backed. So if you're sat at home as a Tory, you're asking, where's my tax cuts? Where's the support for enterprise? What are we doing about disciplining schools? How comes I'm having to have this culture war, this groupthink that I have absolutely no stake in, and every time I open my mouth, I get cancelled. There is a growing number of people in the country who would like to see that represented, that taken on, and I think the next leader, that would be their start point. Because imagine, God forbid, we have a Labour government, you will definitely need an alternative, and it'll need to be an alternative to that groupthink. There's a pervasive attitude, particularly in the establishment, that does not feel like the British people.
Couldn't agree more. But Adam Brooks, that's why this witch hunt against Boris Johnson could actually turn out very badly for the Conservative Party. If the Privileges Committee, and Nadine Dorries, a Boris ally, has predicted, just like I have, that they will find him guilty, if that is then voted through by the House, which would mean that Conservative MPs in large numbers would have to vote against Boris Johnson, essentially, they are risking the prospect of him potentially launching his own political movement. The fact that the Daily Telegraph, you know, this is Boris's old newspaper, this is the Conservative Party newspaper, the fact that they, in their leader column today, wrote about that as a possibility, I think is a warning shot to the Conservative Party. Do not screw over Boris Johnson at your peril.
Look, how refreshing to hear someone in Sean's position speak as honestly as he just has. There is no real difference between the Conservative Party now and Labour. I couldn't vote for either of them, you know, but the thought that Boris could suddenly set up his own party and poll highly, I think, is ridiculous. I said it the same about when there was this big hysteria about Jeremy Corbyn back in sort of 2017, 18, 19. If he had set up his own party, he wouldn't even have polled 10%. You've got to remember, people vote blue or red. That is the tradition.
But I guess Alistair Heath's point is that you're actually going to have a big swath of the population who just feel completely let down by both parties.
The Conservative Party is on the edge of collapse. Now,
it's not united.
It's not united, but going forward, you know, at the moment, if they stick with Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt as the leaders of this party, they're facing annihilation at the next election. Now,
leaders who no one wanted.
No one wanted. There's no mandate. But again, I keep saying the polls are wrong, because if Boris did come back, love him or hate him, he's the only figure that could run Labour close.
I mean, Anna May Mangan, he is, isn't he? Boris Johnson is still the Conservatives' best hope to winning the next election, and that's why Anna May, that's why Labour is so scared of him. That's why the political establishment is so scared of him. That's why this witch hunt is going on. Don't you think?
I think the opposite. I think he doesn't need his own party, because doesn't the monster raving loony party still exist? He could just go and throw his hat in with them.
Anna May,
honestly,
that's unfair. This is a Prime Minister who delivered Brexit.
Of winning something than Boris Johnson would now. I don't know.
So you've got Boris derangement syndrome. I'm going to diagnose you live on air.
No, I don't. I also think Harriet Harman was exactly like Miss Trunchbull in those procedures yesterday. So I'm like in the middle. I'm just like Joe Public here, seeing what they see. And Boris Johnson is a busted flush. And so is the Tory party, unless they give their plumbing a good flush and get rid of them all and find somebody inspiring, find someone with policy.
Yeah, but they've got to be anti-woke, they've got to be pro-Brexit, they've got to be low tax, don't they?
Do you know, I think the country's been through such an upheaval, they actually don't care anymore. People care about their taxes, people care about their mortgages, people care above all else about the NHS, which I discussed before. I think it's a new start now. I really do. And Boris Johnson is over, and his optics are dreadful, and there's no resurrection for him. It's over.
I disagree. Love him or hate him, he's a superstar politician.
I mean, come on, Sean, people have written off Boris Johnson's political career now for the past decade.
They've done it a number of times. The thing I would say, if you're a Conservative MP and you use this opportunity with this standards committee to punish Boris, if he set up something different, he might not work out as PM, but there'd be a lot of Conservative MPs who wouldn't work.
Look, he could destroy the party. But look, I want to move on, because Vladimir Putin was accused of quite literally having a brass neck with his surprise visit to the occupied Ukrainian city of Mariupol this week, because a bizarre video, which is picking up a lot of steam in Russia, claims that the despotic leader is actually using body doubles for trips he doesn't want to take. Now, the sleuths reckon the main giveaway is the alleged doppelganger's turkey neck, with eagle-eyed investigators claiming the man seen in the film has lost his jawline to saggy skin. Amateur analysts also take apart the man's earlobes, moles and wrinkles across his face, forgetting to mention the Putin pictures they're using to compare with the guy in the video are of the Russian leader 20 years ago. So what do you think? Is Putin bottling his work trips? Time will tell. Adam Brooks, Sean Bailey, Anna May Mangan, do stand by, because coming up, as the BBC Shamima Begum podcast continues to try and rehabilitate her shattered public image, is it time that the Begum backing corporation moved on from this propaganda campaign on behalf of a terrorist? My superstar panel are going to thrash this one out very shortly. But next, should Netflix's ghastly Diana car crash scene recreation in The Crown be the last straw for Prince Harry's sordid Hollywood media deals? Her former butler and close friend, Paul Burrell, joins me live to give his vital insight on this straight after the break.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by Headliners. On TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Netflix series The Crown has been intriguing audiences since 2016 with its high budget and high drama interpretation of the life and times of the British royal family. However, producers this week disgusted many royalists as it was revealed by the Mail that the tragic final moments of the late Princess Diana's life have been brutally recreated for Series 6 during filming in Paris late last year. Despite showrunners promising not to depict the exact moment of the crash impact, shocking leaked images of the mangled Mercedes that was secretly smuggled to Paris under tarpaulin by the film crew have caused outrage as it becomes clear that Netflix value the sick shock factor of Diana's final moments over any sort of dignity or respect for the crash victims and their loved ones. And one of those loved ones, somewhat ironically, has recently spoken about the emotional impact of seeing images of his dying mother in that Paris tunnel back in 1997.
All I saw was the back of my mum's head, slumped on the back seat. There were other more gruesome photographs, but I will be eternally grateful to him for denying me the ability to inflict pain on myself by saying that, because that's the kind of stuff that sticks in your mind forever.
Which I completely understand, but surely this raises the obvious but uncomfortable question. How on earth can Prince Harry continue to take Netflix's millions as payment for his own projects when they are prepared to exploit his mother's memory for financial and commercial gain, time and again? There's only one person I want to speak to on this. It's Princess Diana's former butler. She described him as her rock, Paul Burrell. Paul, you're obviously a very close friend of the late Princess Diana. How do you feel, firstly, about seeing Netflix recreate the car crash and actually move the car, the mangled wreckage of the car or a fake version of the car to Paris? How has it made you feel, Paul?
Well, Dan, I think Netflix have just plunged to new depths and depicting the car crash scene and, in fact, creating a replica of the crash car is distasteful, it's insensitive, and it's heartless. We all know how the princess died. We don't need to see it portrayed in graphic detail on TV. It's sensationalism at its worst. I thought, actually, that depicting the Queen as a cold, heartless, distant woman was bad enough, and depicting Queen Elizabeth, Queen Mother, as an actress pulled through a hedge backwards when she had such grace and elegance during her lifetime. But this takes the biscuit. I mean, honestly, they're not thinking about any sensibility towards family members or people who love the princess by revisiting that scene in such graphic detail. Had it been your mother, your sister, your daughter, would you want to see that recreated on the screen? No. She was so deeply loved in this country. There are many ways which Netflix could have shown you the princess had died. A flash of light, maybe, something very simple. But to go into such detail, I think it's disgusting. I really do. I would appeal to the producers of The Crown to do the right thing and delete those scenes because they shouldn't be seen and they shouldn't be revisited.
I mean, look, while I have great sympathy for Prince Harry and the trauma that he continues to suffer around his mother's car crash, I really struggle, Paul, now with the fact that he continues to take the millions and millions of pounds from Netflix, because it feels to me, not for the first time, he is now putting money ahead of morality.
Well, that's Harry's game now. Unfortunately, he's got into bed with Netflix, he's got into bed with the devil, and he's taken the money and, quite frankly, he should give all that money back and walk away from it to do the decent thing. Just like he did with Frogmore Cottages, he gave the money back. The money which he used for the taxpayers' money which he used for Frogmore Cottages would be returned to him. He should do the same thing with Netflix, because Netflix are not a company which he should be rubbing shoulders with after what we've just seen, and knowing how it upset him and William at the time. I was there. I saw what happened. Does he really want to work with a company who are going to portray all of that for the world yet again? I'm really not a fan of The Crown.
And especially, Paul, when Harry, over the past few years, has set himself up to be almost like some sort of moral arbiter of the media. You know, he is so quick to criticise newspapers and photographers, but all of a sudden, when it comes to him making money, he's actually turned into a bit of a propagandist for Netflix and The Crown, while the rest of the family are loath to talk about it because they feel the impact of The Crown deeply, especially King Charles, because he knows how damaging The Crown has been to his reputation with young people around the world. Harry, actually, in interviews, has actively promoted The Crown and said how much he loves watching it.
Well, it beggars belief, doesn't it? I mean, especially in this coronation year, he's not promoting the family at all. He's sort of taking it apart, and we're watching the dismantling of Harry and Meghan because their brand, I think, is going to collapse. I don't think it's going to survive because they are only relevant because they are members of the royal family. They're only relevant because they have royal news to tell. So, you know, how long will that last? And how long do we have to suffer Harry washing dirty laundry in public? Because that's what he's doing. The rest of the family are doing the right thing. They're staying silent. They're having great dignity in silence. And look at Kate and William. Look at the difference between Harry and Meghan on one side of the world and Kate and William on this side of the world. Kate and William are not putting a foot wrong. They're doing exactly what they should be doing. They are representing the royal family in an immaculate way. They are, after all, our future king and queen.
Indeed. And look, I do have to say, Paul, I think you're right, by the way. I think the brand is completely collapsing. I think Harry and Meghan are becoming a laughingstock in the US, actually. They're not taken as seriously over there as they are here, but they're viewed as a joke because people laugh now about the South Park depiction of their worldwide privacy tour. It is a joke. But for me, I think what the Netflix deal shows, and this hypocrisy shows, is that they can no longer claim to take the moral high ground as they have for so many years. Because what this proves is that if it's about the big bucks, if it's about the moolah, they will put any morals to one side.
And I worry if they come back to Britain, the country which they've rejected and abandoned, I worry what the people of this country might say. Because I personally feel that they should stay in America, have a happy life, bring up their children in an American way, and not come back to Britain, because there isn't a place here for them. And I wonder what's going to happen with the coronation coming towards us, whether or not Harry will be brave enough to sit amongst his family members whom he's thrown under the bus. I do think that Meghan will stay in the States. I think she will stay there to look after the children, especially as it's a birthday time. But I honestly think that Harry will come because, you know, he's not the brightest spark in the royal family. And I think he will come and try and pull it off because, you know, it's a story which he can then go back to the States and relate in another world call with Netflix or wherever he wants to do.
And guess what that's all about, Paul? It all comes down to one thing.
Of course it is. It's all about being relevant. And he's only relevant if he has another royal story to tell.
What a tragic state of affairs. What a very,
it's so sad. I'm very sad about
place.
it all.
Indeed. Well, look, Paul, such a pleasure to speak to you. You know, we are all sending huge strength and love to you right now as well. We know you're going through this cancer battle. You are being so brave, so strong. So you know we're all behind you. Paul Burrell will speak very soon. You will. You absolutely will. Thank you, Paul. Now, coming up in Uncancelled, Alistair Campbell cast doubts over how ill Boris Johnson really was while fighting for his life in intensive care with COVID. Why is the man who spun the country into invading Iraq still a commentator of choice for the MSM? Well, former editor of The Sun, Calvin McKenzie, has a lot to say about this. He's here soon. But next, in the Media Buzz, with the BBC's Shamima Begum podcast continuing its attempts to rehabilitate her public image, is this really the best use of taxpayer fee, licence fee money? I say not, but my superstar panel give their thoughts straight after the break.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference. And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I've walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Calvin Mackenzie and Greatest Britain Union Jackass on the way. But first, tomorrow's news tonight in the Media Buzz. And we have the first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages in. Hot off the press, the Daily Express leads with economic optimism as the Bank of England Governor Andrew Bailey hints that we may finally be over the worst of the brutal cost of living crisis. The bank raised interest rates today to 4.25%, though. The Daily Telegraph reports that Labour is plotting a tax raid on savings and investments by raising the capital gains levy. The hike would come on top of other raids on the middle classes planned by Labour, including reversing the government's plan to abolish the lifetime cap on tax-free pension savings. It's just going to get worse under Labour, folks. And the Daily Mail leads on fury at woke barristers who are refusing to prosecute eco-warriors like Just Stop Oil and XR. Leading lawyers have been accused of undermining the legal system by declaring they won't prosecute climate criminals. Around 120 top professionals have signed a declaration agreeing not to go after the groups. I mean, what's happened? What's happened to the UK? My superstar panel outraged by that. I've got Sean Bailey with me tonight, the top Tory, the social media activist, Adam Brooks. They both say that's absolutely disgusting. I agree. Yes. And joining us tonight too, the author, Anna May Mangan. Also disgusting are these twisted efforts to rehabilitate the public image of the runaway ISIS bride Shamima Begum. And they've really been led recently by the brazen BBC, who have made her the star of her own podcast series for the past 3 months. In the latest episode released just yesterday, BBC journalists managed to track down and speak with Shamina Begum, similar name, but different woman. This is the friend credited with inspiring the 3 schoolgirls to follow her to Syria.
So she says,
I didn't force anyone or send them propaganda. I simply informed them what I wanted to do. And when they told me we don't think it's a good idea, I simply went on my journey myself. I'm not responsible for anyone. They came together on their own initiative.
Yeah, right. The BBC went on to report that Shamina played down her friend Shamima's role in the Islamic death cult, dismissing her as a non-believer who was doing nothing more in Syria than, I quote, living off the benefits provided by ISIS. So while the Begum Broadcasting Corporation may be keen to play down Shamima's involvement in the murderous terror group, my interview with documentary filmmaker Alan Duncan, who filmed with ISIS in Syria, uncovered a rather different story.
One of them was telling me that Begum was even trying to recruit ISIS females as suicide attackers. Wow. And I've got that on camera.
So there you have it. The Beeb will happily peddle propaganda that diminishes Shamima's alleged crimes, but refuse to give a voice to people like Alan, who have discovered a much darker truth. So is it time that the BBC just stops these obsessive attempts to rehabilitate Shamima Begum? Adam?
Yes. Look, I've been on here enough times, and the viewers know this girl is a monster. We've got numerous government officials that saying she poses a serious threat to the UK. We have Yazidi witnesses telling us about her patrolling camps with a machine gun. Her journalist friend of 18 months, Andrew Drury, that comes on the show, has said that her new image and her new spin is a pure lie.
Total fake.
Right. So, look, why is the BBC so desperate to give her a better public image? I can't understand that.
It's almost like they dislike our country. Anna May Mangan, you say, though, that you support the BBC. They're doing the right thing and you want Shamima back in the country. Why?
Yeah, the way you're all talking, it's like BBC have done Shamima the musical or something.
Well, they're just short.
It's a documentary.
Just short.
Called I'm Not a Monster.
Well,
that's them saying that they think she's innocent, because in my view, she is a monster.
Right now in this country, there are 200 convicted terrorists, and she should be 201, as far as I'm concerned. To make her 50, she was 15. I'm not justifying anything she did, but she's such an easy target, isn't she? Whereas there's people who we know murdered people, and we don't even know their names. They're in prison, and we don't know who. I mean, tell me who it was who did the Manchester Arena bombing. That oops, nearly swore
you can say that.
yeah, but you
can say that, and I don't name
But we don't name them. We don't, because we don't know them. Whereas she is being pushed on us. And
by the BBC. By the BBC. Who are trying to paint her as some sort of reformed Westerner.
So what should they be doing, the BBC? Only sort of taking a straw poll and saying, well, people would like to listen, like to hear about who?
No, do you know what? Do you know what I think they should be doing?
What?
I think they should be doing the real investigative journalism that Alan Duncan did, and very quickly he was able to track down the sex slave victim of ISIS, who in shocking detail revealed to him the real Shamima. We've heard none of that on the BBC documentary. But BBC documentary is trying to make her, she was just a poor little innocent British girl who was subjected to racism, and then she was a poor little ISIS wife. No, she was sewing suicide
and now
vests.
We're talking about ISIS and how bad they were and how bad it is. So, in fact, it's helping,
Sean wants
isn't it?
to come in here.
Look. Unbelievably, this is why the Gary Lineker thing was such a disaster for the BBC. Because now people don't believe the BBC can be balanced. They don't believe the BBC can be fair. They believe the BBC...
can they?
But they think the BBC has an angle to sell because of what went on with Gary Lineker. They haven't got a theme. Because, look, let's be clear. The BBC should be talking about these kinds of topics. They absolutely should. But they shouldn't be talking about it in this type of way, probably. Agreed. That's the problem here. And Anna talked about the 200 terrorists in jail that we don't know what they did, but they are not free. They have been subjected to our law, and our law has put them away, but so has Shamima Begum. She has been subjected to law, and the law decided she should stay where she is. For me, personally, I do think she was 15 years old, and that needs to be part of it. But what really, for me, keeps her where she is, in my mind, is her response to the Manchester bombings. So when government officials tell you she poses a threat, and then she gives a response in the way in which she did, I believe they're correct.
She showed no remorse. Again, I'll quote, "Women and children of the UK are legitimate targets," she said.
Yeah, I mean...
Beheadings didn't faze me. I've said it before, I've seen some terrible things in my life. I've never seen someone be beheaded.
But we should harness
I would
her,
never
harness
come
what she
back.
knows, who she knows.
I would never come back
because,
from seeing.
because if you speak to someone like Alan Duncan, who really knows how a lot of these ISIS brides operate, he says even though they are trying to portray this different picture, they remain a clear and present danger if they are allowed back.
I mean, she said...
That's why I'd like to see him in prison here.
But she said British women and children are legitimate targets.
She did.
If you run the security forces here, that's more than enough for you to say she should stay where she is.
There's more to talk about than that, because she didn't wake up at 15 a fully...
Who does she inspire? If she comes back, she will become a figurehead for people that want to join and want to do these atrocities.
Well, look, I've got a legal note here in response to criticism of its Shamima Begum podcast by folk like me. The BBC said, this is not a platform for Shamima Begum to give her unchallenged story. This is a robust public interest investigation into who she really is and what she really did. The documentary also features testimony by those impacted by the group. Now, Sky Sports have been cancelling content at a furious pace in recent times, with Sunday Supplement, Goals on Sunday and Soccer Saturday all being shaken up or shelved completely. And British football fans have been dealt another blow this week, with The Sun revealing that the legendary Soccer AM show will be axed after almost 30 years on screen. The Saturday morning sports comedy mashup built up a cult following for its comedic characters and cheeky sense of fun, but political correctness, yawn. We hate it, don't we? And they don't like it, the politically correct mob, because it was often in short supply on Soccer AM. Look.
How old are you?
I'm 25.
I'm
21.
21. How old are you?
I'm 18.
Yeah, you know who I am, don't you?
Happy Tipmas. He's here with us this morning. It is Labour's John Prescott. John.
And maybe that's why the show has come to an end of the road after years of toning down their controversial content to appease the new world of the woke. Viewing figures fell through the floor, representing another tragic example of go woke, go broke. You loved it, didn't you, Adam?
I loved it growing up, yeah. It just epitomised the banter you'd have with your mates.
You're not allowed to have that these
I know,
days
in the football culture. I really liked Soccer AM. It's a shame. Yeah. Hasn't been the same in recent years.
Adam Brooks, Sean Bailey, Anna May Mangan, my superstar panel. Do stand by, because coming up, will Britain always regret not following Sweden's lead over lockdowns during the COVID pandemic? We'll discuss that because it's 3 years, of course, to the day since we were plunged into the first national lockdown in 2020. That's when I crown Greatest Britain and Union Jackass very shortly. But next, in uncancelled fiery Fleet Street legend Calvin Mackenzie weighs in on Blair's former spin Dr. Alistair Campbell after the man who marched us into Iraq launched a cyberbullying campaign against Boris Johnson, claiming, wait for it, claiming, Boris, he made up the whole COVID thing. He was never close to death. Alistair Campbell's become a conspiracy theorist, hasn't he? Calvin Mackenzie lets loose. Straight after the break. We're back in 2 minutes' time.
First and foremost, I'm a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. One of life's biggest mysteries is why media darling of the left, Alastair Campbell, is held up as a pillar of authority in this country despite his shameful past as Tony Blair's Iraq spin doctor. Well, maybe that will now change in the wake of this vulgar tweet yesterday where he said he didn't believe Boris Johnson nearly died of COVID during the pandemic. Boris ally Nadine Dorries swiftly put the swivel-eyed conspiracy theorist in his place, blasting, "There is a horrible hatred and sickness which resides in the heart of some people who are so partisan and so politically obsessed that they lose all sense of humanity. You are beyond help or hope." To Calvin Mackenzie, what I want to ask you is why this ranting, hateful and now conspiracy theorist rabble-rouser remains the commentator of choice for Sly News, the BBC and Channel 4.
Well, if you're in the media, you are, with the exception, I imagine, of GB News, you are of the left. And therefore, you go to somebody you know is going to be safe for them. You're not going to say anything. I mean, Clarkson had a great thing the other day where he said he was going on the One Show. Before we went on it, the producer said to him, he said, "Look, don't attack the public sector workers, will you? Because that would be awkward." Right. So you know, a huge thought process from a very successful bloke is not allowed. If you are a producer for a mainstream television program, you are not interested in a view from the centre-right. You're just not getting on there. You ask any of your panellists over the week. What I can't understand about Campbell, who has a shocking background associated with sending us to a war. By the way, Blair still gets on television, unbelievably, sending us to a war which has led the whole of the Middle East, even today, 20 years later, in complete uproar. What I can't understand is we have to be very, very gentle about Mr. Campbell's mental health issues, which he carries forward as a big kind of blob in front of him when he's interviewed. And yet, when somebody almost dies, and even if they didn't almost die, so they are in intensive care for 3 days. That's close enough, especially with thousands of people dying in intensive care, right? He has no sympathy whatsoever for that man. Isn't that an incredible state? Why on earth shouldn't we let Campbell have it over his mental health? Why should I believe he has a mental health issue? He doesn't even believe what he sees when somebody is lying in a major London teaching hospital, right, for 3 days in intensive care. He's now saying there's a question mark about it, or frankly, I don't believe it. Campbell is a shocker. What he does know, by the way, is that appearing regularly on television has two effects. One, his social media following goes up, because there are a load of mad lefties out there who love all this thing. And also, he gets invited to make speeches and the like to ridiculous charitable organisations, paying him 10, 15, 20, 25 grand a pop. The cash is piling in.
Of course.
There is
and of course, look, I won't stoop to his
nothing
level.
not to like.
No, and I won't stoop to his level. If he says he's unwell, fine, I believe it. But what I think is so despicable about what he said regarding Boris Johnson is he's not just accusing Boris Johnson of being a liar, he's accusing the staff in the hospital who looked after Boris Johnson, who, by the way, never shared Boris Johnson's political views, of lying as well, and that's particularly disgusting. And by the way, we saw this really recently, didn't we, with the Gary Lineker debacle over the last couple of weeks, the way that he was used as a pro-Lineker voice, again, on the BBC, on Sky News, on Channel 4, all the usual suspects, and no one ever bothered to reveal that he makes a podcast for Lineker's media company. So there's actually a financial motivation for him to back Lineker, and that was never revealed at the start of these interviews. So it's astonishing to me.
Right, if you're of the left, right, money comes at you very secretly and nobody wants to talk about it, but it just goes very nicely into the old bank account like that. If you make money on the right, there's a huge outcry. We've just seen it with Rishi. I'm delighted. Last year, he paid £432,000 in tax. That's a lot of teachers. That's a lot of nurses. Yeah. And not only that, makes a change from the scumbags on the left who are basically born with both hands out, wanting their lives to be subsidised. And yet nobody ever says anything that, hey, that's a very good thing that that guy makes money.
Yeah, because we got Starmer's tax return to do today too, Calvin. So Starmer paid £118,000 in tax over the last 2 years compared to Sunak's £1 million.
Right, I'd rather we had 100 Sunaks playing that than 100 Starmers. In fact, being a lawyer, I would prefer that he wasn't in work at all, to be frank with you. But the reality is, all the time, the left get a free ride, either over money, over morality, over social media, anything like that. They're fine. Anybody on the right says anything, they have to be uncancelled. It is astonishing that a Campbell figure could survive the sexed up dossier allegations. Or that could survive, even if they weren't true, right? Even if they weren't true, they could survive a war, right? Which nobody wanted, which cost 175 of our people their lives. How on earth does this happen? It never happens to the right. We are going to need to change the way that the media is run in our country. No newspaper anymore will run any kind of, quotes, dodgy story of any kind, normally involving race, right? Because they think that the advertising community will actually boycott them. What a shocking position.
Well, Calvin, I was shocked. Someone pointed out to me earlier, the front page of the Metro newspaper, I think it's tomorrow, big Burger King ad emblazoned over the front page of the Metro, talking all about how Boris Johnson has told a lot of whoppers at the Privileges Committee hearing. It just shows you, doesn't it? Yeah. It just shows you that the advertising community are so in their left-wing London bubble that they just assume when they're advertising to the entire country that everyone's going to agree with their woke advertising executives that Boris Johnson is crooked. And I thought it's another example of how the advertising industry now is so influential in terms of limiting media debate.
Right, that may be true. I don't think you need to worry about the Metro for much longer, by the way, because I'm afraid that's probably one of the last of their ads. They're not doing very well, and unfortunately, they're culling a load of journalists, as journalists are being...
Which is a shame, because, good newspaper.
Anybody who exposes anything of any kind these days is unwanted within most media organisations. It's a very, very bad... It's a very bad world to want to go into.
Yeah, what a sad state of affairs for the former editor of The Sun to say that. Calvin McKenzie, thank you so much. We will speak on Monday night, but it's time now to reveal tonight's greatest Britain and Union jackass. And my superstar panel return for this. Adam Brooks, who's your GB nominee?
My nominee is, it's honorary. It's Anders Tegnell, Sweden's health chief, for basically showing us that lockdowns were not only wrong, but they wasn't needed.
Indeed. Sean Bailey, your nominee.
My nominee is service animals. After a police horse was attacked by an out-of-control dog yesterday in London, it just made me think about all the service animals that have helped people as guide dogs, help people recover from PTSD, and we are, of course, a nation of pet
and
lovers.
I think we have some video. This really shocked me, actually. Have a look at this attack.
Oh, God.
Really, really horrible stuff there. Anna May Mangan, your GB nominee.
Yeah, I'm going for 13-year-old Max Woozy, who's also known as the boy in the tent. He's been sleeping out for 3 years, raised $700,000 for a North Devon hospice, and it's coming up to time now. I think next week he's going back into his own bed, and well deserved.
Imagine being a parent and allowing your son to sleep in a tent.
Oh, they must be so proud of him.
3 years. OK. All right, I disagree on that one, but I'm going to go with Adam Brooks and Anders Tegnell, the brilliant and brave Swedish health chief who said, no, I'm not following China 3 years ago. We're going to do it our way. And guess what? They were proven right. Uni and Jackass time now. Adam Brooks, your nominee.
My nominee is Alistair Campbell. He's the man that spun an illegal war for Tony Blair. He's a massive hypocrite. He's a really nasty lefty. He got really personal with Boris in his recent tweets, which I thought were pretty low. And it surprises me that he's held up as the arbiter of morals by people like Lineker and the left. Can't stand the man.
Sean Bailey, your nominee.
My nominee is smartphone microphones. Cyber specialists NordVPN have confirmed that our phones are constantly listening to us, giving out our private details. Privacy is dead. We've got to put a stop to this.
Oh, my goodness. Do you know what? I'm so concerned about this because constantly are we having a conversation with someone about something I want to buy and I haven't searched for anything. Then I'll go onto my Instagram and it comes up as an ad. Listening to us. Terrifying. Anna May Mangan, your nominee.
Yeah, I'm going for the Baroness of Mean. That's Karen Brady, who was really horrible to a contestant on The Apprentice last week and said, when the contestant said, thank you, Karen, she said, that would be Baroness.
Oh, let's look at it, because I actually loved it. I loved it.
Thank you, Karen. It's Baroness Brady to you. Baroness Brady. My friends call me Karen.
What's wrong with that, Anna May?
Well, you know, actually, she could, and most people would call themselves Lady, but she would have been Lady Brady, which apparently she didn't think was serious enough, so she decided she was going to be a baroness, and it's fine, as long as she doesn't go around acting like a baroness from the 18th
I
century.
say big up to Karen Brady about that. At least there's someone not woke on the BBC.
You
It's so
corrected me
refreshing.
earlier on your name, I think.
did.
Yes, that's true. But look, I'm going to go... Oh, it's the double win tonight for Adam, because, of course, it's got to be Alistair Campbell as the Union Jackass. Thank you so much to Adam Brooks, Sean Bailey, Anna May Mangan, my fabulous superstar panel. Thank you for your company all week. I am back Monday night at 9 p.m. saying bye-bye, scheming sturgeon. Good night.
Yeah.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee